Stats don't tell the whole story. And I think oftentimes, in a world right now where we're driven by analytics, we don't balance it with the other stuff that's important for coaches to look at. And
Thanks for having me on. So I'd say I decided I want to write a book because I feel like I have a lot to, give other athletes. But there was one chapter that really stood out, and that was that stats lie. But through writing about it, it was not necessarily that stats lie. It's just that they don't tell the whole story. Like if you're averaging 8 points a game, then you're averaging 8 points a game. But there are other things that the stat book doesn't track that you can be doing that helps your team. And it's important not to throw that stuff out. The more you focus on the stuff that isn't tracked in the stat book that is helping you have an impact on your team, the better you'll feel about yourself on the court, off the court, and the better teammate you'll become too, I believe.
You can go to YouTube. You can type in Bazemore celebrations. And there's a guy named Kent Bazemore who was signed by Steve Kerr to a 10-day contract back in the early Splash Brother days. Kent Bazemore was then signed to a full season contract because Steve Kerr valued the energy, or you called him intangible Ike. He valued that role because every time Steph and Clay hit a three, he was doing this big celebration. And Steve Kerr loved that energy he brought, and he kept him on the team, and he didn't play. And I think coaches, really good coaches, they lift up and they put on a pedestal what you're doing here, Dylan, which is, hey, let's value the unvalued. Tomorrow you take over a team, you're the head coach. What 5 stats are you talking about tracking that most coaches right now aren't?
I'm gonna have to think about this one. That's a good question. I'd say charges. Charges are huge because you're. I don't want to say you're sacrificing your body, but I mean you kind of are. You're putting your body on the line, and that's also important because it's a track stat, but then there's also an untrackable sort of part about it. So if you take a charge on a player, that's good, but it's even better because that player picks up a foul, and if you can impact your team by taking away value from the other team. So and that's a very underrated way of having an impact, and not enough players and coaches think like that. So if you deflect the ball, it doesn't get tracked in the stat book. And if you deflect the ball to your teammate gets a steal, and let's say you run all the way to the rim, and then he doesn't pass it to you at all and goes in for a layup. That's fine. You impacted your team. You helped create a steal, and then you also created a 2-on-1. Whereas it's harder for that player to score if you don't run the floor, because then he has an option of passing it to you.
Let's just say you have a big that doesn't rebound the ball great out of their area, but they hit 31 box outs in that game. It's the number of box outs hit. There was 40 shots that went up. He boxed out 38 times. And so his percentage of box outs, 90 whatever percent. And that's a huge win. And you look at the stats, and the lie might be, well, you're big, who's 6'7", only got 2 rebounds. Well, but the real stat is he boxed out 97% of the time, and the other guy only got 1, and he actually won that rebounding. So when you talk about deflections or you talk about inbounds underneath, I really think those stats, and this is where coaches earn their money, is are you tracking what you teach?
For the coach who doesn't have the resources to track a certain stat, what do we do there? Or tell me, hey, that's an excuse, track it.
Yeah, I would say that's a limiting belief there, Sam. That you think it. I mean, I know it doesn't have to be exact. And I know we have more resources in that, but what if one game during the weekend you ask the parent to track high fives? You know what I mean? That's reasonable. There's some parent in there that could track it, and then you go back to your kids and you make a point with it, or you celebrate them because of somebody that did it, and they don't know when it's going to be tracked again. But that's where I think coaches can really earn their money, create with their creativity. I think a good coach is thinking about this stuff. And rather than saying, give more high fives, give more high fives, give more high fives, you're going to get creative and say, I need to make this tangible for them. I need to make this a lesson for them. I need to put some value to this, whether it's a Gatorade and a shout out on Twitter, or whatever, a t-shirt that you make for that team, or whatever it might be. You got to put some value behind it. I think for players, especially in this generation, this day and time, there has to be something there. For instance, Dylan, you talked about charges. Sam, when we went and watched Duke practices, they built a habit. It wasn't even being tracked. You could go under untrackable maybe. But what happened when somebody took a charge in Duke practice? Every player ran over there and picked him up. Coaches started screaming. The towel boys sprinted on the floor and dove and wiped up the floor. And it was a huge deal. And so then all of a sudden it's a huge deal within Duke's team. And they're not necessarily even tracking that, but they're emphasizing it. And so maybe you don't have all of the resources to track some of that stuff, but an alternative might just be to celebrate it at a really, really high rate.
I encourage people to check out my Twitter, and that's DylanKurt3, DYLANKURT3. And then my newsletter is the stat book is not reality.substack.com. That's where all my newsletters are. And then the book will be published on Amazon here in the next month. But really my newsletter, I'd encourage people to go check that out, because that's where I have so many ideas for future newsletters. So thank you guys for that. I'm excited to write, and try to, better understand the role coaches can play with statistics and how they can sort of maximize the impact they have on their team by, celebrating the intangibles and stuff like that. But yeah, Twitter, newsletter, and then the book will be out on Amazon here in the next month or so. But yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.